Coming up, the breaking news that Kyrie Irving is set to return, potentially as early as Sunday against the Memphis Grizzlies. What does it mean for the Brooklyn Nets season? Plus, comments from Kevin Durant in a sit-down interview with Chris Haynes reveals just how much you should love and respect the Nets superstar, while maybe feeling slightly different around one Ben Simmons.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, friends, it's the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. Over there, you're going to find Doug Norrie, owner-operator of VFSR, for all your daily fantasy sports rankings from DraftKings to FanDuel. He's got you covered. I'm Adam Armbrecht, breaking down the New York Football Giants on the One Giant podcast with my boy Andy Mack. We thank you for making us your first listen of the day, free on all those great platforms, and let you know today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. As the world's largest therapy service, BetterHelp has matched 3 million people with professionally licensed and vetted therapists available 100% online. Learn more and save 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/lockedonnba. And Doug, no time for pleasantries. Can't tell you how much I love and respect you, because as quickly as the days begin and end, so too does the news break that Kyrie Irving is potentially nearing the conclusion, almost there, footsteps in the sand, and ready to return for the Brooklyn Nets as soon, it looks like, as Sunday against the Memphis Grizzlies.
Yeah, it's rare that you get 3 separate stories about 3 separate players from the same organization from all different outlets. I mean, it was really just around the horn. Nets superstars, or, big 3, because there's obviously first there's a Kevin Durant story. No, excuse me. First there's a Ben Simmons story from The Athletic. We'll get to that shortly. Then there's a Ben Simmons. Then there's a Kevin Durant story from Chris Haynes. We'll get to that shortly. And we had recorded. I'm going to treat our first episode that we did, that's never going to see the light of day, ends up being a therapy session, more just like sitting on the couch and doing some work around our own feelings around the Nets. Now, again, that one will be put into the archives, because we get later in the day that it looks like Kyrie Irving is going to return as soon as Sunday. Like you said, it's going to end up having been more than the 5 games that they had used as the beginning piece around how long he could miss. I was starting to feel overwhelmingly pessimistic about how this was going to end with him, just because there was things that seemed to be pointing in the wrong directions. But just like that, as the world turns and as the net world's turn, you never can trust exactly what's happening. And now it looks like he's going to get back in the fold. And from a basketball perspective, the Nets desperately need him.
Well, it's funny, too, because Adrian Wojnarowski is the one who broke the over a couple of tweets here earlier in the day. The first tweet was, Kyrie Irving is nearing the conclusion of the list that was put forward to him by the Brooklyn Nets. And then from there, a timeline will start to come into focus around when he could potentially return. But that'll be once they get back on the homestand. A couple hours later, he is officially nearing the end of it, and it could be as soon. So it comes out in these drips and drabs, and I don't necessarily feel, as you said, we had talked earlier, what ended up being a bit of a therapy session, but I don't really feel bad about being kind of lost in the spectrum of what's going to happen with this. I'm not throwing anyone underneath the bus here. People are aware of the name Bomani Jones. He does really good work on a couple of different shows, couple of different platforms. He, as early as today, as recently as today, this afternoon, was saying he doesn't think that Kyrie Irving was ever going to return to the NBA, will ever play again. And by the way, that wasn't like a hot take or a bizarre potential thought. And then just a few hours later, here we are talking about him getting back into the fold. You said about it being pessimistic around what was going to happen. How does this change your perspective on what this season is, or what's going to happen in the short term, long term here with the Nets?
All right, well, as someone that was of a firm belief that I thought this might be the end of the road for him earlier on, I thought that this might be just the straw that broke sort of the entire back of everything around, Kyrie as a Net, just because of the way things were worded. The statement the Nets made was so, really, really harsh. Really
seemingly
harsher.
Definitive.
Yeah, we're not going to be, associated with Kyrie Irving, was what they had said. And it's about as harsh a language as you'll ever hear from a front office, really around anything. And so I remain pretty pessimistic. In terms of, how much does it change my feelings? I think one thing that's going to carry over from me from the podcast that we did earlier is that I think one thing we have to learn with this iteration of the Nets, and frankly, in some ways, I think you and I have probably taken longer to come around to this idea than some other people. Now, some of that comes from talking about the team every single day. And in general, having an air of positivity around the team is helpful, because when you go out and want to talk about a team every day and cover a team, like, you want to like what you see. That's a pretty easy math problem. I think what I'm going to resist the urge to do here is, while I'm happy that he's apparently coming back, they really need him from a basketball perspective. There's no part of me around Kyrie Irving, or really around anything else on the rest of the team here. Like, I need to see it for such a long period of time to start feeling really optimistic about the team, that I think I'm just going to pump the brakes on the emotional part. Great. I'm glad he's coming back. We want him on the court. It's much more fun watching Kyrie Irving play basketball than not watching him play basketball. Just with the Nets, it's like you have to just be so cautiously optimistic. You just have to be so cautious around your own emotions and around your own feelings around the team, because there's just too many landmines. This team is one big landmine. Like, you are just always hot stepping around the next thing that's going to happen. Get him back on the court. That's awesome. Let's get a win streak going. They really needed his brand of basketball really, really bad. And I think you can forgive everybody to say, hey, let's just wait and see how this goes, because we just have never had a long track record of things going really right for a really long period of time. And that's just where we are with the Nets.
Yeah, and just to round it out, Adrian Wojnarowski also posted from the NBA PA to ESPN, quote, he has, referring to Kyrie Irving, been grappling with the full weight of his impact of his voice and actions, particularly in the Jewish community. Kyrie rejects anti-Semitism in any form, and he's dedicated to bettering himself and increasing his level of understanding. Just to round out what feels like the period on the paragraph conversation that has been what was going on with the post, the reaction, the apology, the lack of apology, the apology with steps involved, and everything else that's happened here. But to your point, I think hold me to this. I need to follow your lead on this one. Like, it can't just be he comes back on Sunday against Memphis, Nets blow out the Grizzlies, and everything is right in Nets world, because as we've learned, 2 games, 5 games, 10 games, a lot of things change pretty quickly here. I do think that if he can get back onto the court with this team and maybe start to sniff a little bit of those first few games with Jacques Vaughn as head coach, and think about some of the simple and back to basics mentality that he brought. Well, you plug in Kyrie, this team can be a little bit better. The numbers can get a little bit better. Now, it's not going to change defensively what they've been up to, and we'll talk about Ben Simmons later on, but win some games, right? Win 3 out of 5. Then win 5 out of 7, and then let us look back after 25, 30 games and say that this team is somewhere in the middle of the pack there in the Eastern Conference and showing signs of progress. But until that point, I'm going to have to tragically be reserved even when they are looking good on the court here.
Yeah, and that's just where we are. I think this is where we've been browbeaten with the Nets when it comes to this stuff. And like I said, we had to do, and the good news is things can change so quickly with this stuff. Is, like I said, having done a whole podcast that had a totally different tenor to it, it only takes an afternoon and a couple stories to sort of shift the landscape. Yep. The problem is there's so many examples of this. No other team goes through this level of drama. Again, there was 3 separate stories written around 3 players on an off day that were all varying levels of like where they stand with the current team. That never happens. Like, national stories. This isn't just NJ.com or the Post or like, right. Or someone, And
by the way, all 3 of them thought, I've got the juicy scoop today. Watch out, boys.
And they all did.
Yeah, they all did. I know. And everybody won.
And you get like this. It's just it's crazy. Like, you never see this kind of media stuff from a team on a national level that's under 500. It's nuts. I mean, this is what we're going through as Nets Nation here. It's just, it's really unprecedented in terms of just the amount of attention, both warranted and sometimes unwarranted, that's given on a national level for this team. I don't blame anyone. It's all stories. Like, this is a superstar, high profile team that's had a number of different stutters and missteps along the way. And that's really, really putting it mildly. All right. I do want to get into, we're going to feel better about this. I'm going to get into this Kevin Durant article from Chris Haynes. A lot of really interesting nuggets from this one about Durant's thought process around the trade piece from over the summer. what he wants to be like sort of known for as a player, known for as legacy as well. We're going to get into all that in a second. Like we said before, though, this episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Look, sometimes you wish that your life came with a user manual. There's so many things going on these days. You have challenging emotions. You want to learn productive coping skills. Maybe it's a career change you're going through, a new relationship, becoming a parent, being a Nets fan, all these things that you need to when it comes to just sort of the way you're grappling with things on a day-to-day basis. BetterHelp is there for you. Therapists are trained to help you figure out the cause of challenging emotions and learn productive coping skills. And that makes therapy the closest thing to a guided tour of the complex engine called you. BetterHelp is connected over 3 million people with licensed therapists. It's convenient and accessible anywhere, 100% online. As the world's largest therapy service, BetterHelp has matched 3 million people with professionally licensed and vetted therapists, available 100% online, plus affordable. You like to hear that? Just fill out a brief questionnaire to match with a therapist. If things aren't clicking, you can easily switch to a new therapist anytime. It couldn't be simpler. No waiting rooms, no traffic, no endless searching for the right therapist. Learn more and save 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/lockedonnba. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedonnba.
All right, so the next piece of the big news cycle that was only the Brooklyn Nets was, as you mentioned, the Kevin Durant sit-down conversation with Chris Haynes, released on The Athletic, correct? No, Bleacher Report.
No, Bleacher Report.
Bleacher Report, yes. So he sat down and had a conversation. As you highlighted, it goes all the way back to the summer, the trade request, what his thought process was, and by and large, it was there. I'm overwhelmingly walking away from reading that article and saying, man, this is exactly what you want to hear from Kevin Durant. And all of his emotions and thoughts were very justified, including the idea he wanted to be coached harder. He wanted more plays to be run. Whatever it took to make this team better and make the players around him better, he was all for it. It's interesting that ends up coming out as, fire Steve Nash, fire Sean Marks, or I'll want a trade potentially. But it all seems to be driven by the idea of wanting to be the best version of himself as a basketball player and the best version of the Brooklyn Nets.
Yeah, look, it's a long article. I would encourage you to read it. It's got a lot of quotes. It's really heavy. It's really heavy on the quotes mostly. He talked a ton.
Yeah.
He talked a ton in this article, and it's really rare at times to see this. I mean, this was like an on-the-record, really just like long-form interview following the Kings game, right? Mm-hmm. So it was, at a time where you could really have a lot of emotions around this stuff. You just got completely stomped. I would really encourage you to go read the article. To just give some takeaways from this, like Adam said, part of it is he mentions that he just didn't think the team was practicing enough. He wanted to be practicing more, and they weren't doing those things. He didn't think the team was going in a direction that he wanted to, just like from a basketball perspective. When it came to, he mentions like closeouts, and he mentions drills, and he mentions the things that you think about when it comes to practice and getting better as a player. He does talk at length about, sort of what's happening for him this year. He understands his place on the team. He mentions the rest of the starting lineup almost by name when he says like guys like Sumner and Claxton, and that, they're playing with him, but that a lot of the focus is going to be on him. It can come off, you can hear it coming off arrogant if you want it to be. You can hear it just coming off as reality, which is what I heard it like. Depends probably how you view Kevin Durant to see how you would view some of those quotes. Well, real quick, and then I did get it. And then he talks about just his legacy also, about how he feels like he's been in every situation you can basically be in at this point, from championships to rookie of the year to teams that are struggling, right? Like he mentions this team as being a sort of a struggle, and just saying that he's got limited time on the basketball court, and he wants to make everything from it for it, and he just wants to be like known as a hooper. I'm paraphrasing there. So I think a lot of this we already knew about him, but I did find it refreshing to hear him speak this way. And I don't think I came away thinking he's a Net for life or anything like that. I don't think that definitely wasn't said, but it did at least lend some clarity to around what I think we already kind of knew what his process to be when it came to basketball.
Yeah. And I think so. The couple of things were, as you mentioned, the legacy piece I thought was interesting, because inside of that, he did say, I've seemingly been through every different possible type of version of being in the NBA. And he said the experiences of missing the playoffs, of getting bounced in the first round, of going to the bubble, like all those things were all different experiences. And as he said, every superstar goes through those things as well. And even mentioned, as we talked about last year and this year, even the different looks that defenses are throwing at him. He's like, it's all new. It's all different stuff. And I like that challenge. I want to find a way to be better, to be able to beat those things and to be the best version of myself. I'm not even trending negative for the sake of it. I will say, when you come out of a game like that, and we understand it, and you're right? Edmund Sumner, like, what are we talking about in this lineup here? Some people read that and said, this is a, bit of a message to the organization. Let's get Kyrie Irving back out here because it's kind of a one-to-one replacement of who would be on the court. I will say the one critique that you could put towards Kevin Durant overall in his career, and it's not even really a negative, it's just a reality of his personality. He is not the vocal dominant leader of a basketball team. And that need not necessarily matter. It didn't matter in Golden State. You're surrounded by other talent who have been through those experiences, and you can almost rely on them to take the lead on it. Coming to Brooklyn and with Kyrie Irving and almost setting it up to be the dynamic of Kyrie Irving will be the more vocal of the two, and I'll just go out there and play. He doesn't need to change who he is. He doesn't need to change his personality. He doesn't need to change the way that he approaches whatever you define leadership to be. Because sometimes it can just be do what I do on the court. There was a great reference somebody made today about Derek Jeter didn't say anything. Just went out and you see what I do, and that's what you should be doing, right? Leading by example. And also, in this iteration of this team in Brooklyn, it doesn't seemingly feel like that's going to work out, or it hasn't worked out, right? So again, I'm not critiquing him. I'm more critiquing what the Brooklyn Nets maybe put themselves into here, combining these personalities without necessarily having a dominant force that can stand in front of everybody and lead them. And I, if I will put one criticism at his feet, it was the only passing negative thing you could say. It's factual. The lineup around him is not good enough to win significant basketball games. It's also not great though. Nicholas Claxton's been having a heck of a season. Joe Harris has been there a long time. He's having a terrible start to the year. If you're looking to galvanize and get your guys around you, I don't know if making a statement like, what do you expect when it's me and these other dudes? That's not necessarily, and away we go, friends. Let's get this thing back on track. And again, that is such a minor footnote to this, but it maybe does speak to just the difficulties that this team has galvanizing itself when maybe your most vocal leader in theory is Kyrie Irving, but we know what's come with him.
Yeah, I think that's just this is what I mean about it's probably those quotes probably just end up boiling down to what you feel about Kevin Durant, right? And if you're a Kevin Durant, lover or apologist or whatever it's going to be, you're going to see it as just realistic, right? Those are realistic. If you have championship aspirations, to the current starting lineup isn't going to be there. He clearly wants to have Kyrie Irving back and have better players, and that's just the reality.
But I love I love Kevin Durant. I wanted to stay a Brooklyn Net, and also, again, this is your team, right? This is the team that you have. It just it is what it is. I think at some point. So what is it? I want to move off of this because otherwise it's going to make it sound like I'm trending this way.
No, I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying. You want it to be all positive and a little more rah-rah, and he's just not that guy. I get it. He's just,
it doesn't matter.
And he's just not going to be able to be that guy. And so I think that maybe from my perspective is I've already just come to grips with that, right? We know his leadership style is lead by example. I mean, he does mention a couple things. He mentioned Cam Thomas by name, and he said his legacy is his relationship with Cam Thomas and talking about
that part of it,
right? Yeah. And bringing
passing it on to younger players, yeah.
And I think that part is almost the rah rah part. It's just a basketball rah rah. It's just we're gonna I want to practice because the rah rah piece ends up being a professionalism rather than a galvanizing. It's I want to practice. I want to do these things. I want to work on closeouts. I want to bring up the younger players. He wants to do these things. And it's just not going to be this overwhelmingly positive thing if he doesn't believe it to be positive. So I just think it's a different style. And I get what you're saying. The problem is the Nets don't have that another kind of guy like this, right? Okay. They just don't have a dude who is like this, because even in their best days, Kyrie is not this guy. I mean, Ben Simmons is clearly not this guy. And so they do kind of lack some stabilizing vocal force. That player with this current team is not walking through the door. So that's just where they are.
And by the way, so 2 points on that. One, if you're the Brooklyn Nets, if you're Sean Marks, if you're Joe Tsai, you need to understand, and we talked about this way back when they signed them, understand what you're bringing in the door with these superstar talents, and understand what do we need to surround them with so this can be the most successful version. That might be Doesn't have to be the highest level of player, but a vocal locker room guys. The retention of Patty Mills maybe speaks to that, wanting to have some type of veteran leader presence, right? So you need to understand what the best way to surround these players is so you can have the highest level of success. The other thing I think that I took away from it too, and again, I mean this as a positive reflection on Kevin Durant, is all of his comments and quotes are almost in disregard of the Brooklyn Nets. Like, he wants to practice hard. He wants to do everything to play hard. He wants to pass on his legacy. He wants to continue to challenge himself and have experiences, but none of it was directly correlated to the Brooklyn Nets having success. And you mentioned before about, did any of this indicate that he's going to be a Brooklyn Net for life? No. And that doesn't diminish anything about the way I feel about him. If anything, I feel more like, yeah, I'll be interested to see where Kevin Durant goes next and how successful the back end of his career could be. And in some ways, I don't want him to be anywhere else but in Brooklyn. And also, I'll probably be able to be much more excited and happy for him when it's happening somewhere else, because it never seems like it's going to come together here.
Yeah, that's what I meant about, like, I didn't come away from the article thinking like that he's going to retire a Net by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, he was very complimentary of Jacques Vaughn, which is a good sign. I think there are some other positives to take away. He talks about Vaughn at length here about like Jacques Vaughn's veiled stuff towards Nash, right? Like, or not even veiled. It's like,
just quickly, all these quotes and comments, they said, going back to, he said, you can go call Steve Nash right now and ask him. I came into their office and said the things that I wanted, what I was looking for. And in that regard, he said, not veiled shots or direct shots. It's saying, not only do I prefer a particular type of coach, but also I came and actually told you what I want. I told you how you can coach me, how you can treat me, how you can try to move this thing forward with me. And maybe it never got across that line. We could debate about the other players on the team and whether or not that was possible.
Yeah, so like I said, I agree with you. This was Nets. This was not related to the Nets as much. It was like, hey, maybe there's a chance, but there's not. This isn't like me stamping that I'm going to be in Brooklyn for the rest of my life. I didn't read any of that from this article. It was like, I want to be in a situation that lines up most with my basketball prowess and my ideas around basketball. Yeah. Right now, in the short term, it seems like it kind of is. And there's a version of that doesn't last long. There's a version of it that lasts a long time. I don't know, but I think it's really independent of the Nets at this point. Like, I think Kevin Durant knows what he wants as a basketball player. And I do believe that if he doesn't think he's getting it here, he will move on without any remorse.
And I know we're going to go on to Ben Simmons here in a second, but don't forget, he left OKC and chose to go join the Golden State Warriors. This almost follows the narrative. This is what I want to go do. I want to go play with other superstar talents. I want to go win championships. He left there, and by all accounts, still has positive comments and relationships from the Golden State Warriors, but said, I want to go have this different challenge. Now, this challenge can go any which way, unsuccessfully in Brooklyn. He's only going to reflect on it, it looks like, as I took on that challenge. Those were the results. Now, what is the next challenge that I want to give myself in my career, and where could that take me?
All right, we're going to get into Ben Simmons here to close out the show. First, going to tell you about our friends over at Sweat Block. Look, maybe you've been in a situation where, you've had to be in front of some people. You've been wearing clothes that you're a little bit worried that they're going to show through some of those sweat stains. Maybe you're just a Nets fan, and you've been dealing with the idea that you're trying to talk about the Nets, and I can get a little uncomfortable at times, and you're gotta check what's going on in and around the different areas where that sweat can show. That is why you need Sweat Block. Sweat Block wipes were invented by doctors. They're guaranteed to work. And if they don't, you don't have to pay. They call it the Sweat Block Dry Shirt Guarantee. If Sweat Block doesn't keep you dry, you get your money back. If you or someone you love is experiencing embarrassing sweat or odor, try Sweat Block risk-free today. Save 20% with promo code LOCKEDON at sweatblock.com. It's also available on Amazon. Go to sweatblock.com. Use that promo code LOCKEDON for 20% off.
Okay, so the last piece of the trident of news cycle that was the Brooklyn Nets today was around Ben Simmons. Now, you and I, following a terrible Kings loss, said if there's one little glimmer of a silver lining, it's that Ben Simmons did some things that we haven't seen him do yet, and maybe he's getting more comfortable out there. I highlighted his pre-game comments around seeing little glimpses of his old self on film when he watches tape. And then comes to pass that Shams Charania, the players reporter, as he's associated, comes out and kind of says the organization, the players, everybody in Brooklyn is disappointed in Ben Simmons' dedication, his practice, and maybe even questioning his desire to play basketball.
Yeah, it was like one of these, like such a deflating moment when you read it, because it kind of confirms some of your worst fears as a basketball fan about what you've seen from Simmons on the court and how it might be viewed internally within the organization, right? Like we haven't heard a ton about it. He's been in and out of the lineup with the knee issues and the back issues, and obviously he's not starting. Again, like you said, we were complimentary of the way he played the other night, which would look like for the first time he was getting, pretty aggressive in the different things that he wanted to do. But it was pretty clear also the way it was worded. I mean, even the title, if you read the title of it, it says inside the Nets building frustration with Ben Simmons, his team looks to emerge from early slump. I mean, that's the title of the freaking article. And it goes on to just discuss that, like, there's probably people in the organization that are questioning really everything from commitment to health to mindset to everything. And there was a reference to a players only meeting in which, now in the article, Shams says that Markieff Morris called out Simmons directly. I will say Keith did take to social media and push back on this about the source was incorrect, and like sort of implying or just flat out saying that he didn't say those things to Simmons. Okay, even if that part isn't true, there's someone giving some information here that there's not a full on board with Simmons as a player, and maybe like and everything that's going into it right now.
Right.
So even if we back out the Morris comments as to not be true, there's clearly something else going on internally here where not everyone is on board with the Ben Simmons experience. And you don't have to squint and see that based on what you've seen so far with him on the court and him sort of like ramping back up into NBA life here, because it has looked way worse. It's looked bad more than good in his time. And let me grab a stat while you comment on that, because I did see someone post an interesting stat, but like, I do think this is like a thing that's just not going to go away anytime soon for Simmons. And if these articles, these sort of like, I don't want to call it a hit piece, but it's like close to a hit
chum
piece.
In the water. It's like you can smell the blood. Why don't we just throw a little bit extra in there and see if people start to pile onto it? And to your point, I listen, the play hasn't been good enough from Ben Simmons. If you almost correlate this to the article from Kevin Durant, and you think about his desires and wanting to be coached hard and wanting to practice and galvanize. I mean, listen, there's the physical side of it that maybe Ben Simmons can't fully get up to gear when it comes to that. But then there's the in-game stuff, right? I mean, for everything that went on in the offseason leading into it, then you fire the head coach and you go to Jacques Vaughn. There's this little bit of positivity around this team. But guess what? That positivity was with Ben Simmons not playing. And then with Ben Simmons coming off the bench, it was in spite of him. And if you're Kevin Durant, again, go from the highest level down, right? You're looking around saying, no matter what, Kyrie's suspended, he's going to come back. Okay, we're going to need more than just Kyrie. And by the way, Ben Simmons, you're supposed to be the unlocking piece here. Yeah. You're supposed to be the stalwart defensively, and then someone that can really open things up on the offensive end. And as we always say, how long do you wait before you feel like you have a sample size to judge a team? Well, it's been so chaotic with the Nets. We're going to probably need even more time here. But the reality is, you have a 6-9 record, right? I mean, you're 15 games into the season. You're 3 games below 500. And while the East isn't running away, at some point you got to have a rhythm to feel like you have any confidence in accomplishing something this year.
Yeah, you've already banked a lot of losses. The season isn't infinite, right?
And several that you felt like you shouldn't have
exactly,
as well. Yeah,
exactly. You don't have infinite time to make up some of this stuff. I really feel bad about who. I mean, anyone could figure this out, but I did see someone post this, and I don't remember who it was. This really alarming stat among the many alarming stats that are going on with Simmons. Simmons this year has more fouls than he has field goals and free throws made combined. Yeah. And I saw that and I was like, well, that about sums it up. And so so it's just one of these like sort of cherry picked little pieces and stats that you can, but sometimes it's not really cherry picked. I mean, these are like, this isn't great, right? It's been a lot of just mistakes, and it's been very little shooting, and you're paying a lot of money for a guy who doesn't score so far. And yeah, we started to get to see it the other night, but when you're getting excited about a guy who finally dribbled at a defender or finally asked for the ball in the post, to like, these things are so basic, but basketball 101, and we're still saying they're like trying to get excited about it, or like getting these little glimpses. I can see why there would be building frustration, because he's still so far away from the version of him that needs to be something for the Nets to be anything, that I can understand why people would be frustrated. And, if you go on and read the article, there's reasons that you start feeling for Simmons here. He's quoted about stuff about his back and being taken to the hospital at times because the pain was too much and like having no feelings in his legs and the different physical sort of ailments that he's gone through. You can feel for him on that side of it too, that the guy has dealt with, significant physical injury here over the last couple of years that maybe doesn't get talked about enough. But it's all part of this same sort of theme here, which is the Ben Simmons experience is not going well. And I can't even call it a ticking time bomb because I don't even know what you would do with it, because I don't know where it can't really be, remedied in any way, except just to say an article like this being written just, again, points to just intense negativity around the team.
And what I think too is, and we talked about it coming into the season, what were the expectations for Ben Simmons? And in a multiverse of madness, you could have heard me say on another discussion we were having, remember, we drank the Kool-Aid. Doug and I both said this is delicious on media day. Everything was perfect. Everything they were saying, you couldn't have won it any better, including Ben Simmons saying healthy, ready to roll, looks great on the practice court. Well, it's really hard to accept that as being true when you then see what's happening on the game-to-game basis. And by the way, it would have been equally as hard to have him try to temper the expectations around what to expect from him.
Of course.
And at the
He's
same
in
time,
an impossible spot. He's in an impossible spot.
That's why I said, I think you're right in feeling sympathy for him. And then but overall for the team, then it's why then I do back this out. And I kind of say, okay, I don't know what the timeline's supposed to be. Remember, lost in all of this was that, hey, TJ Warren is getting close on 3-on-3s and starting to ramp himself up a little bit. It's probably going to be December by the time we get a real sense of that. There is this world where after everything that's gone on here, come talk to me on Christmas, right? When you'll have some sense of where Warren's going to be. Presumably Kyrie is back with the team and getting a little bit of rhythm here. And we'll see where Ben Simmons is. And so much of what happens over the next month plus of basketball is going to tell you what this organization is going to do, what this team is going to do, right? And I think we would have known maybe a little more definitively much sooner, but when you have 9 different episodes of chaos in the first 15 games of your season, it would be probably disingenuous to overreact to it. And let's be fair, in my heart of hearts, I did have a moment like that where I got to a pretty rip this thing down to the studs mentality. That may still turn out to be right, but I think it's probably smart to be a little patient here.
I mean, it's not an overreaction. This is the 50th example over the last 2 years of stuff that's just been totally haywire. So you just can't react any other way at this point, right? It's just it's some highs, a lot of lows, and it's just very easy to start seeing, it's the glass all the way empty, right? Not even half full at times, because there's just too many things that happen with this team. And they always just give you, and this is the classic Nets experience, they give you just enough. They give you just enough of that little cheddar to be like, oh, I'm coming along. Here we go. Oh, we lost. We gave up 153. No problem. Kyrie back on Sunday. Right?
What's going to turn around this narrative around us getting trounced by the Kings? Maybe Kyrie's coming back.
Yeah, it looked like a counselors versus kids game at the camp. For most of it. But guess what? Simmons looked pretty good, right? Simmons looked good at 7 possessions. This is just the classic. This is just the classic Nets thing. This is what's always happened. It's like, hey, if we can just get this guy back, if we can just get this guy injured, if we can just get healthy, if we can just get these 3 guys back on the court together, if just, yeah. It's just seasons over seasons of this. So if it sounds like I'm, sort of poo-pooing some of this stuff, it's not. It's just the reality of the situation. We all want, look.
I'm not in a glowingly positive spot right now, just to be clear.
Of course, but the thing is, what we want as fans is resolute, right? We want the Nets to be good. That is the thing that makes it sort of hard sometimes, is that you hold out hope. If you had no hope, you wouldn't care at all. The opposite of love isn't hate; it's indifference, right? Yep. It's the reason you hate, the reason
one of the great American poets,
the reason you hate the situation is because you want to love it so bad. If we were all indifferent, I mean, go watch a bunch of 11-year-olds run around a field on 11 a.m. on a Saturday. You'll be indifferent about sports. There's versions of this where you can go watch and not care. Yeah. The problem is you want to care and you want it to be good. So then when it isn't, it feels so much worse. And that's I think the Nets situation here. All right, we're gonna get out of here. 2 podcasts in the books, only 1 actually going up on the feed today. Make sure you are subscribed to YouTube. we did this one live, man. I was like, yeah, well, we're gonna do it live now. Like almost 200 people in here at one point, just listening over here on YouTube. Really appreciative of what everyone is jumping in here, throwing up a million messages. We are gonna be back after the game tomorrow, or now tonight when you listen to it, against Portland. So we'll be coming late after the West Coast game. Win or lose, we'll be over in YouTube live. Make sure you subscribe to YouTube, set those alerts so you know when we're going live, because most times it's gonna be after games, but hey, sometimes on a Wednesday evening at 8 p.m. you get it too. So hit like and subscribe over there on Locked On Nets YouTube.
Whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster himself. And if you gaze long enough into an abyss, the abyss will gaze back into you. Freddie Nietzsche.
Oh, one of the all-time great poets. We will be back again following the Blazers game tomorrow, talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.